Thank you, Manuel, for this very kind introduction. Thanks to Manuel, João, Martin, and everybody who invited me. When I got this invitation, I felt very honored, and I said immediately, I guess, yes, I will do it. And then some days later, I thought, huh? And why should I present at this Eawag seminar? And then I asked people, and I got different answers, and I could kind of cluster those answers into three, and it's like three different movies, I would say. So the first one is a black and white movie, almost very nostalgic one. So almost exactly 11 years ago, so we missed kind of the 10-year anniversary. We were here on stage to introduce and present the newly established Environmental Social Science Department. So this talk is for sure 10, 11 years after that, also talking broadly about environmental social sciences. Then the second movie is maybe called Blind Date. It's not a romance, just to say, but apparently, and some of you for sure remembered the talk by Reto Knutti here. And then there was this idea, okay, he challenged social sciences quite a bit, so maybe there could be a social scientific follow-up of that. So this is the blind date because I was not physically, but I saw his talk obviously online, but he is not here today, so this is a total blind date. And the last movie is maybe the least spectacular one. It's a documentary on something like science policy interface or so, in my role of a Proclim president. I'm a Proclim president now since 1.5 years, and even as a social scientist or a political scientist as I am, I learned it the hard way to interact with politics, and I will talk a little bit about that as well. Good, then some days ago, I took this title that I gave, I read it, and I thought, what? But this is the title I gave, I cross-checked, and yes, it is. So I thought, first of all, I think there is some grammar thingy happening here, but never mind. So I thought I should spend a little bit of time with this title. And the first thing, obviously, is environmental social sciences. So what do I mean by environmental social sciences? And I remember very well my dear colleague Isabel, also professor of comparative politics at the Institute in Berne, when she had to deal with Bernhard Truffer, and she said, you know what he put as a discipline? Environmental social science. Does such a thing exist? I said, okay, this is a philosophical question, huh? But yes, it does. And then, but I think we should ask, what is social science? So social sciences, we think about disciplines like sociology, I would say, maybe, or political science. Where I studied in Geneva, human geography was also part of social sciences. Here at Eawag, we have more economic geography in our department. We also have psychology and economics. Usually those are so big disciplines that they have their own department. We have them here in our department together also with decision analysis and inter and transdisciplinary expertise. So we are very broad, and our common denominator, and this is, in my view, the huge advantage of our department, is the environment. So we have, very often we witness in universities quite a random set of social scientists, but here we have this common denominator of the environment. And very recently, I went to a big environmental history conference, and I said, oh, history, this is only one discipline, but this ranged from archaeologists to text analysts. And then I said, oh, we can be calm at Eawag. So we have a nice set of social scientists knowing what we are doing, mutually knowing what we are doing. And yes, this is environmental social sciences, but I would still say it's kind of a brand. But I learned that also for other departments here at Eawag or wherever, it's kind of a brand, the name of the department as well. And then grand challenges. So here, as you know, I'm thinking about anthropogenic climate change, biodiversity loss, but also war, migration. Some call them wicked problems, but very complex problems we can research about. And I will talk a little bit about academia, a little bit about the science policy interface, and maybe a little bit less due to time constraints about the science practice interface. Okay, so 10 minutes later, she's still on slide number 1. So the first prejudice against social scientists I already fulfilled. So yes, stereotypically we talk a lot, we do not show a lot of numbers. But this is actually not so true. I will show it in a moment. But I continue with not showing numbers, but pictures. And for the first set or first part of my presentation, I need your help here in the audience and also in the audience online. And it should be very easy. It's just the first keyword that you think about, or maybe also the second one, when you see this picture, and you can start shouting out loud. And those who are online, writing in the chat, and Manuel will then help me gathering those as well. Nature, yes, okay.
KI produce.
Relaxation. Yes.
Biodiversity. Ecosystem. Green. Calm.
Sustainability. And please think about manuals and my discipline a little bit. Insecticides. I put insects, and then I put also insecticides. Okay, now, keywords. The wildfire protection. You say some that you think could be new.
Ecological process.
That's very good. Very good.
Destruction.
It's difficult. Okay.
Helplessness.
Okay. I continue. Very different one. I took it. A bit embarrassing, but still I took it. The end. Okay, this is good. The end, maybe here.
Paradox.
Oh, paradox.
Or future.
The one before. Okay, we can stop here. If not, I will terribly run out of time with the whole presentation, but thanks a lot for that. So can you kind of figure out, first of all, what more or less it's sometimes a bit difficult, what this side means in contrast to this? Or what distinction I could have made? Yes, not so. As I said, it's not always crystal clear because we study a lot of different phenomena, but this is more things that are, I would say, studied or developed by science. And this is somehow the real world interaction with the forest in the practice, so management, hiking, so it's really in the normal life, we are interacting with the forest more or less like this. And this is obviously policy and regulation. And these are more concepts, if we put it like this, or processes that are studied by science. But it's, as you see, it's sometimes a bit difficult. And why did I change colors? So I put here ecosystem services, resilience, to a certain degree also sustainability. These are resilience ecosystem services concepts that where social scientists appropriated the nature, so to speak. So actually, so resilience is it's something that you can witness and describe in in ecology, for instance, and about ecosystems or ecological systems, but we kind of took it over and also put it into social sciences, for example, how resilient a community is after a disaster, social capital, and so on and so forth. And the same way with ecosystem services, it's a very anthropogenic way in conceiving ecosystems. But I would even argue the other way around, it's true as well. So for a long time, there were billions of dollars invested in physical research about climate change, even though the climate change we are talking about is so-called human-induced or anthropogenic climate change. So the source of the problem is not the nature, it's the human. So the question is this really a natural phenomenon? Is it a problem that is coming from nature? So the question is, or what I want to say, almost how are problems defined, and for everything you could also use or need social sciences to address those challenges. Or even in a more extreme way, I would say here, I do not see anything natural anymore. So as I said, I took this picture, and yes, I belong to those Swiss people who think that I was born with skis on my feet and that my son is born with skis on his feet. And if I'm not so patient and pedagogically skilled, at least at the latest age of 6, this kid has to go to the ski school. Apparently, snow cover is not a criteria. Again, snow cover is not a criteria. Thousands of people run to the hills or run to the mountains between December and April, and snow cover does not seem to be a criteria because it's a regime that was established. We think it's stemming from the dinosaurs, the age of dinosaurs. No, it's only 100 years old. So it would be probably not so difficult to change, but it's a hardly established regime related, and you know it, to water management and allocation, but also, for instance, to land use. Farmers become employees of the ski resort during winter. So it's an infrastructure, it's a culture, it's a workplace. A lot of things are related to that. And if on October 23rd, a politician from the Bernese Oberland, where this picture stems from, would say, I go to Berne, to the parliament, and I will change this regime for you because there is a need for change of that, probably he will not get many votes. So this is why I say there are problems. They are totally socially constructed. And this is also my first claim. All problems are socially constructed. Okay, this is maybe a little bit extreme, and this does really not correspond to the research we do here. This is why I brought a counter example, so to speak, because obviously a lot what we do also at Eawag is happening at this interface, why I put health kind of here, but close to the border, and biodiversity here, also close to the border. And this interaction seems very important. I brought only one way how to study this, so those social ecological networks. So on the upper part, you see the social part, actors, organizations interacting with each other to manage a forest, to manage a water course, etc., etc. And below, ecological network. So the food network is probably the most famous one, but also migration network between different wetlands or forest patches, for instance. This is work that is done a lot in Manuel's group. And here I borrow from Julia's, she is here as well, work on amphibia and habitats and corridors in the region of Zurich. And the idea here is that those actors behind those places, like the forest, like a cemetery, like a park, they collaborate, they inform each other, and that as soon as they interact more, also the corridors, so the ties that are important in the ecological network, benefit from it. And We did the same some years ago together with Ruth, who is here as well, and others on micropollutants in the Rhine River Basin. On the upper side, you see the social network of people. Where is then this thing? No, it's me. So you see here the network of people here, for instance, 2 georeferenced in space, 2 waterworks, and here the pollution area. And here the area of competence of those 2 waterworks. And here you see an area where no actor is competent. And so here you have this area of pollution or of a problem where nobody is responsible for or seems to be responsible for. And so we drew this super nice graph with mass analysis. It's a herbicide that is modeled here in colors through the river stream. And then the gray area are the actors who are competent to manage this. And as long as it is gray and thick, no problem exists. But you see when we turn around the corner, there are colored areas of pollution with nobody there, because this is why it's white. So Liechtenstein, Austria, Germany. So the transboundary aspect of this management does not work. This was so the message, what we did. So before I come to processes, is it easy to do such social ecological network analysis? No, it's not. It's a lot of work, a lot of interdisciplinary knowledge or exchanges that need to happen. It's hard work. Do we save the world? Probably not. But it's a lot of fun, and we are happy here at Eawag that we can really play at this interface between social and ecological, also social and technical systems here. But let's come to the processes, because they are important for change. And so we have the problems, and then they should provoke some processes that are studied by social sciences. And here we have, the climate is changing, why aren't we? And this claim is from the Knutti talk. So no one ever made a decision because of numbers. They need a story. And this is our battleground, I would say, our play field. So yes, we have a lot of research about those stories and how to frame them or not to provoke action. So one first ingredient might be knowledge about processes. This is my colleague Isabel Stadelmann. With her, we researched before the vote at the ballot in 21 the CO2 law and the preferences of citizens. So 5,000 citizens answered this survey, and we asked them, do we have a carbon tax in Switzerland? And most of them knew about it. Then we asked, how is the money redistributed? Is it through the general, or does it go to the general confederation budget? Is most of it redistributed to the people and the economy? Do we promote renewables with it, with the most, or do you not know? So this would have been the right answer, but it was the one that was least chosen by people. And so this is actually the book that came out of this research in German. And after the vote at the ballot, Sommaruga said, yes, we do not need taxes because this is what the people do not want. And our research would suggest maybe we should have a more nuanced view on that. Maybe people do not know enough about it. It's not that people are stupid. This is not the message. It's more, how can we inform people about complex phenomena? And this is the research of postdoc in our group, Lukas Fesenfeld, who did also survey research in Germany and the US. In Germany and the US. And he figured out that when emphasizing urgency, so the climate crisis, this is not what makes people move. It's more information about how climate policy and climate mitigation policy works that makes them change. So yes, the role of knowledge, information, and education seems relevant in here. And I just want to say something about media, because this is relevant too. So we studied 20 years of media coverage in Switzerland here about climate policy making. And you see peaks always when there is a summit or something else happening, so the media attention is high for climate change mitigation. And what the message here is, yes, we get information, evidence, and knowledge through the media, obviously, but it's not a constant source of information where evidence is communicated. Obviously, you all know that, but for us as social scientists, we work a lot with media data, text as data. So we rely on what is reported in media. And sometimes media themselves are a political actor or a societal actor. And for us, it's sometimes tricky how to deal with this little nuance that media is obviously not neutral and is not a constant source of information. Okay, and then this is from X. This is Claude Longchamp, a colleague in political science. He's now retired. He was a lecturer in our institute. And what he says is the emotional linkage to parties in Switzerland. So he said this yesterday or 2 days before. So the emotional linkage to parties is decreasing, but people still vote for the same party because of habits. And this is a bit bad news for evidence use. So emotions, convictions versus habits. So if you try to convince somebody about something and this person even says, okay, I'm okay with this information, but then this information is not linked to a different party, the person still votes for the party that he or she was always voting for. And this goes even further with beliefs and evidence. Here, a very recent study, also only 3-4 days ago, I saw it, from alternative conceptions of honesty to alternative facts in communications by US politicians. So they analyzed the discourse of US politicians between 2011 and 2022 and came to the conclusion that the reference to studies, to academic research was heavily decreasing, and that people were, this is the expression in English, speaking their mind. Or as we would say, having their heart on the tongue and just speaking out, and this was preferred and this was increasing, and references to evidence from academia was heavily decreasing in the US political discourse. And this is obviously research. It's not only done by us in political science, it's done by communication scientists, here at Eawag by psychologists, also economists thinking about that. And we are not only interested in politicians and decision makers, but also obviously in stakeholders. So one project I am lucky to lead is this Trapego project about pesticide governance, where many people here, or most people from the project, are employed here at Eawag. And our colleagues at ETH, economists, they tried out nudging with farmers, and they found out that it does not work. I was not so much surprised, I must say, in the sense that farming decision-making, it's much more complex to only give them information and then they start to change farm practices, for instance. Let's think about, because the information that was given was about health effects of certain plant protection products, also called pesticides. So, then their willingness to change the grapes, so to fungus-resistant grapes, for instance. But as you can see here, so if this plant was bought 5 years ago, a farmer wants to stay with this maybe for another 30 years, who knows? And then also, what is their knowledge about fungus-resistant varieties? Maybe there is not enough evidence about how they perform under hail, under frost, under heat waves, for instance. So farm decision-making is a very complex thing, and a rather easy thing like nudging is not working, and this is not a surprise. And there we come in from interdisciplinary social sciences, I would say, to explain also how behavior and change can happen. But let's come to the solution. So I have another claim. So when nothing helps to change behavior, many people say, let's call the state. And more state intervention leads to more action. Yes, could be, but in like the strongest state intervention is a ban. And there are very toxic substances that you know better than me, and they should be banned, or they are banned actually. But it is always a bit different in a household situation. Let's think about drugs, but also let's think about pesticides that you can buy at co-op. And yes, it's written there that you should not enter them in the water cycle. But a ban is only as good as its control and as its sanction. A ban is only as good as its control and its sanction. And if there are situations, and in household situations, it's very, very difficult to control and to sanction people. And this is why some problems, they would desperately need a ban or a strong state intervention, but it's just very impossible to implement it. And I have also to say there is some hope. I'm a child from the 80s, or a bit now, but I went in the 80s to school, let's put it like this, and we learned how to recycle. This was big then. So it was new. So the municipality started to set up those recycling areas, and we learned it in school like math. So 1 + 1 is 2, and a glass never goes in the normal trash. And this was very effective in my case. I never asked my classmates, but I can imagine that it was very effective for them as well. So also persuasive soft tools can be very effective. And then obviously we have the situation a little bit in between. So you remember this is from the pandemic. So Switzerland, for some time, this was at the beginning of vaccines, so went for a persuasion, so a campaign, and we had this of coverage of the population who were vaccinated. Is it vaccinated? Yes. And then here, this is from a district, from 2 districts in Austria, where they gave money to the people and incentivized them in a monetary way. So obviously our economists would know explaining things that happen like this much more, but then at the time, the vaccination coverage raised a lot. So you can say, yes, we need to be nuanced about it. The effect of policies and policy instruments depends about a lot of things, and this is also what we tried to show here with Marlene Kammerer and Jack Baker, 2 scientists in my group in Berne, where we tried to explain the gap between what countries promise under the Paris Agreement and in their NDCs and what they do domestically. And it's easy. So above the line, those countries, they do more domestically than they promise internationally, and below the line, they did less than they promised. You can see we are in nice company there, obviously, but a pattern that it's hard to see here is obviously we have a democracy pattern here, and the democratic style of a country is an explanatory factor here. Why is this? Because in a parliamentary democracy, you have 2 very different actors that come into play to harmonize international with national policy making, and even worse in a direct democracy. So in a parliamentary democracy, it's the government and senior representatives of the administration who negotiate something with their peers. And nationally, a whole different process is going on when parliament does legislation. So when parliament decides about laws and domestic policy making and needs majorities, and the conflict lines are totally different, and then occasionally also the people in a direct democracy come in. So it would be pure coincidence if we would have harmony between what we promised and what is nationally introduced. It would be a miracle, so to speak. So this is why it is kind of, from the system, very difficult to create ambitious policies. This is maybe a bit bad news, but it looks like. Okay, and now I'm slightly coming to my last claim. And if the others were not true, this one is true. Social scientists are particularly reluctant in engaging in the science policy interface. Sorry to bring a very simple example, but if you do a water analysis, would you do something with the water before you do the analysis? Obviously not. This would bias your analysis. So as a political scientist, and political scientists are even more particularly reluctant. So as a political scientist in this Trapego project, we want to figure out the preferences of all political parties in the parliament about pesticide risk reduction. We want that all parties answer our survey. If they perceive me as a green hippie researcher who wants to protect the environment, whatever happens, probably a lot of parties and party members would never answer my survey. So I have a true, real problem. So it's really, and I stole this from Kaspar Hirschi, but it's somebody else who said it. So it's a UK Parliament member who said, you cannot be both a government advisor and a campaigner against government policy. It's slightly a bit something else, but still, it's difficult to mix roles, to become a policy advisor on the one side and a researcher about the political system. This can be tricky. It changes, at least I can tell for Manuel and me maybe. With the years, we get more courage and we say, okay, let's be crazy and let's give some policy advice as well, with the dangers that there is, and it depends a lot of the institutionalization. So in the UK and also Anglo-Saxon system, you have institutionalized policy advisors. So many researchers, at some point in their career, they become policy advisors, usually included in the parliamentary services. And then after a time, they can go back into academia. And in Switzerland and in other countries, we do not have this role or job of a policy advisor being still perceived as a researcher, or it's very rare. So this has a lot to do with trust, obviously, between the two sides, science and politics, but also with the system. And in our, in this Trapego project on pesticide governance, Benjamin Hoffmann in Sabine's group, he also led an article about evidence use, and this is obviously very intuitive, but the other partners of science policy interface have different interests. Some are true truth seekers, others are more pragmatic, and we call them sense makers. And the last category obviously are benefit maximizers. And maybe it's up to us also when we engage in this interface to know our partners on the other side a bit better, and maybe also to know how we deal with that, because as soon as we talk about a policy, research output, and it's taken up by politics, then we lose a little bit of ownership. Then it can go a little bit crazy, let's call it like this, and we should be aware of this at some point in time as well. So is there any chance for sustainable decision making? Some people say yes, if we go out of the pure politics in that sense, and if we include different people into decision making, be it the civil society on the left side, in the middle it's a mini public or a citizens assembly, so creating new organs, for instance, or entities, and the science task force or a forum, a scientific forum on the right side. What can be challenges from a democratic point of view? As soon as non-elected officials are involved in policy design, me as a citizen, I lose a little part of my voice at the ballot, because I cannot vote or dismiss people who are not elected. And the accountability chain becomes very long. So this means that, okay, I can hold accountable a parliamentarian and not vote for him or her the next round. And then I hope that this parliamentarian then is responsible for the election of the government. And then the government is responsible for setting up a citizens' assembly or setting up a task force. So the accountability chain becomes very long. And this is why democratic studies say this reduces my input legitimacy. But this is not a problem if it is compensated by good outputs. So this is also the argument for it. So it creates better results, better policies in the best case. And this is why losing a little bit of input legitimacy is outweighed by gaining output legitimacy. But you can imagine those people who think the output is crap and I lose my voice. Those are the ones who go then to the street or do something else. And this mechanism needs to be understood. And I can definitely see that some scientists, they get frustrated with some political systems, the Swiss one and also others, because they think, oh, it's a lot of work that I invest in this science policy interface and then still nothing happens. So there are other arenas where we can raise our voice, or we can become an activist as a scientist. This would be one way, so civil societal arena. I do not say what is positive or negative for challenges and advantages of it, just as a remark. And the other one is we could support people in court. So for instance, the Oeschger Center for Climate Change Research wrote a support letter. It's called a third-party intervention for the climate seniors, the Klimaseniorinnen, when they accused Switzerland in front of the European Court of Human Rights. When I saw then, so we were then invited to also online only, but still we were invited to be part of the session in courts, and I saw the government representatives sitting there who were accused, and I knew all of them because sometimes they are friends, even research partners. I suddenly thought, yeah, I was not so aware of it, what the implications or consequences could be. Until now, no consequences, but just to say, yes, we're definitely not in our comfort zone anymore, but this is also good to some extent. So this is always my last slide. Now it's not the very last, there is another one, and we should have the courage to creative destruction. So a lot of regulations, a lot of new laws and policies are introduced, but maybe it would be also worse to abolish some of them at one point in time, mainly if they are incoherent with some of the goals that we are setting. So very quickly, and this is my last slide, so actually my claim zero was social sciences, environmental social sciences is only a brand, and yes, maybe it's only a brand, but I hope I could show that there is some substance in it as well behind this brand. Then all problems are socially constructed. I would say many of them are, but some are not, and this is why we are very glad that we are interacting here at the interdisciplinary interface between social, ecological, and technical systems and expertise. No one ever made a decision because of a number, they need a story. I think this is true, but needs to be a bit more nuanced when we look at social scientific research. More state intervention leads to more action. No, this is not true. And finally, social scientists are particularly reluctant in engaging in the science policy interface. Personally, I think it's true, but this does not mean that we cannot challenge social scientists still to engage in this interface and also challenge other researchers. And where social scientists can definitely make a contribution is also in studying the interface. It is a proper research in social sciences to study the different forms of science policy or science practice interfaces. And I think there is still some room to develop. And I think this is also a pathway forward. Good. This was it from my side, and thank you very much for your attention.